Good morning. Welcome to MassBio's weekly town hall with President and CEO Bob Coughlin. I'm Laura Rudberg, our Director of Events, and we're thrilled to have with us today Lisa Lacasse, President of the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network, who will share insights around the critical work needed to improve health equity in cancer and get cancer research and clinical trials back on track. Welcome, Lisa. Welcome, Bob. We're thrilled to have you with us. I'm going to dive in with some questions, but we want this to be an interactive discussion. So please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen to ask questions throughout, and we'll get to as many as we can. Lisa, I'm going to start with you. Can you talk about your work around health equity in cancer and how ACS CAN is working to address disparities in cancer incidence, mortality, and survival?
Sure, and thanks so much for inviting me here today, Bob. It's great to see you, Laura, and all of your audience. Needless to say, it's an interesting time, and I love the format of town halls, and I really appreciate the time today to tell you a little bit more about ACS CAN and our work. So let me just start first by just saying that we are a nationwide patient advocacy organization, and we're the advocacy affiliate of the American Cancer Society. So many of you know, iconic organization that just turned 107 last month. And so we work nationwide in all 50 state capitals and Congress to engage policymakers in our fight against cancer. And we do that with by creating partnerships with all stakeholders, including all of your member organizations, the life sciences, biotech, pharma are very, very important to us. And the last thing I want to note just organizationally is that we are fiercely nonpartisan. We really like to say that the only side we are on is the side of the cancer patient. And the role that our corporate partners play in our work is really important. So I'm excited to be here today. So Laura, just directly talking about kind of our work in health equity. I mean, obviously, it is a historical time right now in our country. We have been very clear that we need to be part of the solution to the systemic racism that is very evident in our country. Health equity and cancer disparities is really central to our ability to achieve our mission. Cancer disparities are really horrifying in many ways. So statistically, Black Americans actually have the highest cancer death rate in most cancers. And so we've worked for our legislative agenda writ large is very focused on health equity issues and decreasing cancer disparities. But so through our priorities, including research, as you mentioned, clinical trials, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit, and our access to care work, quality, access to comprehensive quality care, all really feeds into this issue of addressing populations that have been very much underrepresented in healthcare access and our work.
I'm sure that you're really focusing a lot on inequities more than usual. That leads us right to our next question, which is for both of you. Lisa and Bob both. You've been outspoken about the recent protests and the need to address systemic racism in our country. How are your organizations helping to lead that change? And what role should leaders in our industry play? And Bob, I'd like you to start, and then we'll go back to Lisa.
Laura, I had a little trouble hearing you there. Could you get a little closer and repeat that for the audience?
Sure, of course. You've both been outspoken about the recent protests and the need to address systemic racism in our country, which Lisa just mentioned. How are each of your organizations helping to lead that change? And what role should leaders in each of your industries play?
You're talking, I believe, I'm going to repeat what I heard. You are asking about the recent protests and the need to address systemic racism in our country and what our organizations are doing to help change. Well, hey, it's a great question and it's a timely question. And first, Lisa, I want to thank you for joining us here today, because for the folks that don't know, MassBio and the American Cancer Society Cancer Action Network have a long-standing relationship where we work together. Because what is it that we both care about? At MassBio, we care about solving unmet medical need for patients. What does the ACS CAN do? They want to help patients with cancer, and the work that they do is amazing. And I want to thank Alice Pomponio, who is on the board of MassBio and also on the board of ACS ASCAN, and she has really ensured that our two organizations continue to work closely together. And again, I also want to thank all the folks who are joining us here today. This is the first time that we've broadcast from the MassBio Hub. So if there's any technical glitches, bear with us. This is the first time that we've done it. And I just want all of you to know that the MassBio Hub is open for business as it relates to COVID compliant rentals. If you need office space or meeting space that will be COVID compliant, give us a call and we'll tell you more about that. When you look at MassBio, we've had a strong focus on diversity and inclusion for years, and now more than ever, right? We need to use our influence as an organization to change our industry and our communities, and we'll keep our members accountable for the critical role that we play. The thing that amazes me the most is the outpouring of support for our ED&I program here at MassBio. As many folks know, we hired Edie Stringfellow to be our Director of ED&I, Equality, Diversity, and Inclusion here at MassBio. And there's so many programs that we have had underway, but it's so important now that we double down. Just this morning, we released a preview of our strategic plan to expand our D&I initiatives, and we really need the entire industry's help. So all of you, if you want to make a difference, every employee here at MassBio is coming up with ideas for how they can help improve D&I within our organization and more broadly. So, we ask everybody, and we encourage leaders in our industry, adopt practices internally, at your own companies to ensure that people feel included and that diversity is supported, and create metrics to hold yourselves and your organizations accountable. It can be as small as simply starting a forum for employees to share their ideas. MassBio, what we've always done in any areas where our industry needs to do a better job, we pull together best practices and we share them. And we want to be a resource for all of the companies. So, for all of us in the industry, it's our responsibility to utilize the platform that we have and the privilege that we have to affect change. I always say to folks, and Lisa, I'm sure you'll identify with this as well, we heal people, right? When things are broken, we fix it. Well, how is, systemic racism is just like illness, and we need to fix it, right? And we need to heal it, and we need to cure it. And that's what we can do as an industry. So here at MassBio, we're so excited to continue the work that we started a couple of years ago and actually make meaningful change. And we are so excited to work with our partners like Lisa on this program.
So Bob, I just want to pick up on a couple of things that you said. One, it's really important for us to all take a step back and really listen. I've spent a lot of time with our colleagues, my Black staff, and really understand the leadership role that we have to play. I took over as president last year, and one of my two highest priorities was diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's been a priority for the enterprise for many years. And one of the things that I noticed is that, when we execute a campaign, we create a campaign plan. You all sit around, you decide who your targets are, you're very deliberate, very specific in the work that you're going to do. As Bob mentioned, you set metrics. And I recognize with diversity, equity, and inclusion, we did not have a comprehensive plan. And so that's one thing that we have created in collaboration and partnership with the enterprise, and for ACS CAN specifically, to really look at how we can lead in our critical efforts to decrease cancer disparities. And so that has meant for us that we are looking very specifically at several health equity strategies, but most importantly, that we know that we have to be part of this incredible need for leadership and be part of the solution to systemic racism. I think we've all unfortunately watched and talked about it a lot. But now I think, as Bob, you mentioned, we really need to identify very specific actions and make it happen. I was watching earlier your conversation with Jody Morrison, I believe her name was.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of what she said really resonated with me. And I think that what we really need to do as leaders of organizations and life sciences in particular, because we really are, as Bob mentioned, trying to heal, is we have to engage the communities that for us reflect the face of cancer. It cannot just be about uh, higher socioeconomic populations that are able to you know, access healthcare because they happen to have health insurance. So I believe there's a lot that we need to do, and ACS can and ACS are very committed to that leadership role and want to work with our partners on some unique strategies to really activate in a way that we know best. We know how to identify problems and create solutions, and this is one where we really need to step up.
I just want to check. Can everybody hear me a little better now? I dialed in.
Great, Laura.
Awesome. Yeah. Lisa, Bob, thank you both so much. And Bob, personally, you know, this means a lot to me, how much MassBio is doing towards racial equality. And I feel really empowered by you and our organization. So thank you for that. Lisa, that leads right to our next question. You mentioned this briefly before. How can we as an industry better support diversity in clinical trials? And why is it important for patient outcomes in this unique, and is this unique to cancer?
So certainly clinical trials and issues related to enrollment, just let me just start like at a macro level, enrollment in clinical trials is dismal. I mean, I don't need to tell your members that. Before I came to ACS CAN, I worked for the National Institutes of Health Clinical Research Center. That was I started there nearly 2 decades ago. I feel like the issues that we were talking about during that time, the clinical center is exclusively for clinical trials, are all the same themes that we're still talking about now. And I think that there are 2 big issues. One is that we must work to diversify enrollment. This is particularly true for ACS, for cancer, but I think it runs the gamut from a disease standpoint. And secondly, and one of the things we're working really hard on is looking at the systemic barriers to patients enrolling on clinical trials. We can't keep doing the same thing over and over again and expecting to have different results.
Right.
And so the things that we have found is that you know, trials happen at academic medical centers. Well, 80% of cancer patients are in the community setting. So it is very difficult for those patients to actually travel. Even getting to that, there's even a step beforehand where they don't actually even hear from their providers that they may be eligible for a trial. So there are all sorts of very detailed barriers that we need to create solutions around. ACS CAN's working on 2 very specific projects right now. One is called the Blue Button Project, which is really about making it much easier to scan patients' electronic medical records in their community setting and getting that into some sort of a filtering system for clinical trials and see if some matches come up. So really completely lowering the barrier of scanning patients who have a diagnosis and seeing if they may be eligible. The second project is looking at how we decentralize clinical trials. And this is one area I would say that, you know, it's hard to say that there's a silver lining to COVID when there are so many people that have died from this pandemic. But there has been a loosening of many of the norms that have usually been in our healthcare system. And you all know this, related to the use of telemedicine, delivering more medications in the home. So there are some opportunities here that we really need to grab onto and start thinking about different policy frameworks and regulatory frameworks for clinical trials, particularly cancer clinical trials. And I would really just want to encourage all of your member companies, many of whom have been working with us on these clinical trial projects, and we have lots of opportunities. So if you're interested, please follow up with us. But talk to the patients of the communities that you really want to engage in as you're designing your trial. They will tell you if it feels like the number of visits you are requiring will keep them from enrolling because it's too problematic for their efforts, for their ability to actually engage and be part of a clinical trial. So really looking at eligibility criteria, for example. So there's lots of different ways in which our clinical trials can be designed in different ways, and really reaching out to the places in which these patients are actually receiving their care, because that's probably the biggest barrier of all.
You know, if I could follow up on that, Laura and Lisa, thank you so much for talking about what ACS CAN is doing, because you're talking about solutions to the problem. For years, as an industry, we've talked about what the problem is. And the problem is that the patients that are in clinical trials do not resemble the patient population that we're trying to serve. So one, how do we know if it's even as effective as we think it should be? And two, it's a further symptom of healthcare disparities that are out there. And for us, you know, I'll give a personal experience as a cystic fibrosis dad. My son was in 6 clinical trials before he was even 6 years old. And I realized how difficult, if you're not in a 2-parent household, if you're not in a household where one parent can dedicate their time to caregiving as opposed to working, right, which is very scarce. How do you pay for parking? How do you pay for lodging if you're not fortunate enough to live near the care center? How do you pay for the lunches and the food that's required? It's really, really difficult. And you know, we've been really pushing for a long time to see what is it that we can do as an industry to help that. How do we get member companies to actually provide for travel, housing, logistical support for the families? That's a huge roadblock right there and alone. And then when you think about recruiting, what if people don't have the technological ability in their homes to do the research to find out if they're fit for a clinical trial? And that's why having registries is important. That's why we've tried to embrace here at MassBio and as an industry, digital health. You talked about telehealth and wearables. Is there a way we can have patients participate in clinical trials where they don't have to go to the clinic, where they don't have to go to the hospital? And the more and more we can engage people that way, and again, I agree, this is one of the silver linings that's going to come out of COVID-19, because this pandemic has forced us to embrace telemedicine. It's forced our industry to embrace new ways to engage with patients. And think about it, it's been very challenging to keep clinical trials moving forward during this time. You can't take people with underlying health conditions and send them to a hospital to check in their clinical trials. So how is it that we've had to become more creative? We are doing that. And again, the end game and the metrics that we want to use and how we can gauge success is to ensure that the participants in our clinical trials resemble the population that we want to serve. And until then, we will not be successful. We will not consider ourselves successful.
I want to echo that, Bob, because what you're saying is really important. And again, we have to do things differently. We're not going to get a different outcome. And that's exactly what you're saying. And I have this phrase that people have said to me before that, we need to stop admiring the problem and really focusing on solutions. And I think the one thing I do want to mention that I forgot about was we do have a long legislative agenda around this issue. There is a new piece of legislation that has been introduced, the ACS CAN help design, called the Henrietta Lacks Enhancing Cancer Research Act. We're actually going to broaden that so it's not just about cancer. People don't think it's just about cancer. So that's at the congressional level. We're obviously working across at state capitals to make sure Medicaid programs will cover the routine and ancillary costs for a routine cost for clinical trials. That's another really important thing. And then something I know all of your members are surely following, and Bob, I know that you must be working on, is the new Cures 2.0, which will be the next, the next iteration of the Cures Act representatives to get an opt-in. And they've now released their sort of their dialogue summary, and diversification of clinical trials is one of 6 priorities. So we've got some momentum here, but we need everyone involved, and we really encourage all of your members to be thinking about what their role specifically can be in the public policy arena as a partner of ACSCAN and MassBio, or also their work, their own work, and really thinking about looking at their trials, the trials that they're designing themselves. But I wanted to note that there is a big legislative agenda here. Public policy engagement and regulatory change with FDA is going to be really important to the future success of our moving these metrics.
Absolutely, and our policy team looks forward to continuing to work with you on that down in Washington, D.C. and what we can do here more locally in Massachusetts as well.
Sure.
So you both touched on this, but Lisa, I've read your reports on how COVID-19 has impacted cancer care. Can you share more insight as to how we can get back on track? And will this period have lasting impacts on cancer care, clinical trials, and research?
So great question. So ACSCAN in the middle of last year launched a patient cohort to really be able to collect some both qualitative and quantitative real-time data from cancer survivors. And they were defined, a survivor was defined as either in active treatment or having been diagnosed within 5 years. So really rich data that we could get from this cohort. And right as the pandemic was really picking up and we had moved home very late, last days of March and early days of April, we did an initial survey. And we did a follow-on survey in the, I guess I'm losing track of time, early in May. And so what we're finding is, you know, not surprising, I guess, but really disheartening that over 79, nearly 80%, about 79% of patients are saying that they've had an impact on their care, primarily delay of care. As you can well imagine, cancer patients are immune compromised. It's so their fear of really, going to their doctor's appointments, getting their treatment has been really challenging. The other major issue that, again, is no surprise with the increased unemployment rate is fear of losing their health insurance and inability to pay. We 46% of our response patients are saying that they have concerns about being able to afford their care. So these data are rich and really need to be actioned on. I was listening to NPR this morning, this little vignette, and Houston, there was one of the major medical centers in Houston had basically come back online. They had prepared for COVID. They hadn't gotten the surge that they had expected. And as they were bringing their regular units back online, they were all talking as an executive team how they could never really do that again because it delayed too much care. And now they have this incredible surge in the city, and they are again taking their, cardiology units, et cetera, offline. So we really need to do, and our science and researchers are going to be important in understanding a better way to make sure that we're not creating these barriers for people to access their care, even in the middle of a pandemic. You asked about, impact on trials. We've heard from NIH that many trials have been interrupted. We are advocating for a $10 billion infusion into NIH that they can use to reignite clinical trials across all of the institutes, and really, continue to work to figure out how to make sure that this research is not lost. And unfortunately, we are seeing in some projection models that there is going to be an increase in mortality because screening rates have gone down. But overall, I think that we need to now really figure out how to be more sophisticated and better communicate with patients who actually do need to, get to a physical location for their care.
If I could follow up on that, while COVID-19 has impacted cancer care in a negative way, I'm hopeful, and you folks know I'm an optimistic person anyway, right, by nature, but I'm really hopeful that we can use some of these lessons that we've learned during the pandemic to get us back on track, but in long term, accelerate innovation. to see how digital health, and we talked about it earlier, the fact that telemedicine is here to stay, and that telehealth and digital health will accelerate how we can execute on clinical trials. That's an amazing thing that if it were not for COVID-19, we probably would have just admired the problem, right? Like you said earlier, Lisa, I love the fact that you said, if you keep doing things the same way, the outcomes are going to be the same, right? Well, we need to change how we do things. If you want to change how things are, you need to change how you do things. And COVID-19 has forced us to do that. And when you look at the amount of companies right here in Massachusetts, there's over 85 companies now that are doing COVID-19 research, whether it's in testing, therapies, or vaccines. But to think of how fast they're working. Think of how quick diagnostics have changes to meet the need of what we were facing as a society. Just the fact alone that the most important thing to our world's economy is a vaccine is truly an extraordinary time. I never thought I'd say that in my life. Well, think about it. The most important thing to a cancer patient or a CF patient or an Alzheimer's patient or somebody fighting ALS, the most important thing to them is a therapy or a cure. Right? So if we are able to put the best minds in the world together, partnering with academia and government, all working together so that we can accelerate the time to invent a vaccine to perhaps 12 months, who would have thought that that was possible? So now you think to everybody, cancer is ubiquitous. There isn't a person walking on the earth that doesn't love somebody that's either died from cancer or currently fighting cancer, right? So let's take everything that we've learned and use this unprecedented level of collaboration, right? You see how everyone's sharing ideas. This isn't about competing. This is about us doing what we do best, solving unmet medical needs. That's why the amazing people that work in this industry are so amazing, because they get up every day to go to work and solve unmet medical need for people that in most cases they don't even know. I can't help but think of how fortunate we are in my family, because a therapy for cystic fibrosis came to reality in a nick of time, right? We didn't have a lot more time. Now we have some time. That's an amazing thing. So, I just want to see the collaboration and the spirit of collaboration and the goodwill of this industry, and all the amazing people that work in innovation in the life sciences get the credit that they deserve, because they want to make the world a better place. They want to get the world back to a point where we can get things back to that new normal that everybody's talking about. And I'm excited and I'm optimistic, and I honestly can't thank you, Lisa, for your leadership at ACS CAN and everything that you do for sick people, because you're an amazing human and we truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob. I know we're running out of time here. You were right, it flew by. But I do want to just pick up on sort of strategic partnership. This is critical. We have to engage all stakeholders, not just in the cancer space, but for me, I will say, for those of you who are engaged in oncology, and for those of you who care about access to care, which are all of you, we cannot, people will not reach their health outcomes if they don't have insurance. So let me just give a quick shout out as well to Alice Pomponio. She's a board member and just fabulous partner. And I do want to note that we have a couple of upcoming events. I'm an advocate, so I got to put in my plug at the very end here, of which MassBio. Bob, thank you so much for your incredible engagement. We are doing things a little bit differently this year, but we will go virtual. And this networking event we're entitling Reigniting Innovation and Research, and that is tentatively scheduled for October 22nd. We'd love to partner with all of you. Please consider sponsorship. And then there'll be a follow-up virtual event as well that's going to focus on health equity and innovations of care. And that will be in November. And then for next month in July, we have our national forum in DC that will also be virtual. Scott Gottlieb will be our keynote. Again, we will get all of that information for those of you who may be interested in those events. We really encourage you to engage, be our partners. It's very, very important to us, and we look forward to our ongoing collaborations. So Bob, thank you.
No, thank you. And we'll be sure to share all of that information with all the participants on this webinar or Zoom call or meeting or virtual town hall, whatever you want to call it. It's all about sharing information and engaging people in our community, and we'll be happy to share all that information. I know that I'm interested in all of the events, and I will be participating in them with you. So thank you so much, Lisa.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Bob. Just a heads up, we're taking a break next week, so there won't be a town hall next Tuesday, but we'll reconvene on July 14th, where we will discuss the future of office space and how real estate needs have evolved during COVID-19. So everyone, have a great 4th of July holiday. Have a wonderful weekend. Take care of each other, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Laura.